From kingdoms to nations, the evolution of empires. Throughout human history, kingdoms have risen and fallen, each contributing to the shaping of nations as we know them today. This evolutionary journey from small, localized realms to expansive empires and eventually modern nations is a fascinating tale of power, politics, and progress. In this video, we'll explore how kingdoms transformed into empires and how those empires laid the foundations for the nations of the modern world. 1. The early kingdoms, foundations of civilization. The concept of kingdoms dates back to ancient times, when small, organized societies began to form around a central authority figure, usually a king or monarch. These early kingdoms, such as ancient Egypt, Sumer, and the Shang dynasty in China, were typically centered around a city or a region, with the ruler holding absolute power. The kingdom was often built around agriculture, with the development of writing, trade, and organized religion playing key roles in uniting the people. These early kingdoms established the basic framework for governance, law, and culture, serving as the building blocks for larger empires to come. 2. Rise of empires, expansion and unification. As kingdoms grew in power and influence, the desire for expansion became inevitable. Empires began to emerge when kingdoms extended their control over larger territories and diverse populations. The Akkadian Empire, founded by Sargon of Akkad in 2334 BC, is one of the earliest examples of this transformation from a kingdom into an empire. Empires like ancient Rome, Persia, and the Han dynasty in China sought to unify vast lands under a single rule. This was often achieved through military conquest, diplomacy, and the integration of different cultures. The idea of imperium, or authority over a vast domain, became a defining feature of empire building. These empires brought about significant advances in infrastructure, governance, and culture. Roads, communication networks, and legal systems were expanded to maintain control over far-reaching territories. However, this vastness also made empires difficult to govern, leading to their eventual decline in many cases. 3. Medieval kingdoms and feudalism, the fragmentation of power. After the fall of great empires like Rome, Europe, and other parts of the world entered a period of fragmentation. The early medieval period saw the rise of smaller, feudal kingdoms. These kingdoms were often decentralized, with power divided among local lords and nobles. The Carolingian Empire under Charlemagne was one of the few attempts to unify large parts of Europe during this time, but it too eventually fragmented. Feudal kingdoms such as those in medieval France, England, and Japan were built on the idea of loyalty between vassals and lords, with the king often serving as a figurehead rather than a central authority. This period of fragmented rule set the stage for the later development of nation-states. The Age of Exploration and Colonial Empires. The rise of nation-states in Europe coincided with the Age of Exploration in the 15th and 16th centuries. Kingdoms like Spain, Portugal, and later Britain and France began exploring and colonizing new territories across the Americas, Africa, and Asia. These colonial empires marked a new phase in the evolution of kingdoms into global powers. Through exploration, trade, and conquest, European powers established vast overseas empires. The wealth generated from colonies fueled their economies and allowed these kingdoms to solidify their dominance. However, the expansion of colonial empires also sowed the seeds for independence movements and the eventual transformation of colonies into modern nations. The birth of nations, from empire to independence. The late 18th and 19th centuries saw a wave of revolutions and independence movements that dramatically reshaped the global political landscape. The American Revolution, 1776, and the French Revolution, 1789, played a significant role in the decline of absolute monarchies and the rise of nation-states based on the principles of democracy and self-determination. The fall of the Ottoman Empire after World War I and the dissolution of the Austro-Hungarian Empire marked the end of an era of large, multi-ethnic empires in Europe and the Middle East. Many regions gained independence, and new nations were formed along ethnic, cultural, or political lines. Across the globe, former colonies in Africa, Asia, and the Americas fought for and achieved independence, leading to the creation of dozens of new countries throughout the 20th century. 6. Modern nation-states. A new global order. The 20th century solidified the shift from empires to nation-states. After the two world wars, empires that had dominated for centuries were dismantled, and the concept of sovereign, independent nations became the global standard. The United Nations, founded in 1945, became a symbol of this new world order, where nations, rather than empires, were the primary political units. Modern nations are built on shared identities, whether they are based on language, culture, or political ideals. While the legacy of empires can still be seen in border disputes, cultural influences,